I thought I was resting. I thought the quiet mornings with tea and job listings open on my laptop were just a temporary pause, a small, forgiving chapter between the career I'd lost and the one I was building. I had no idea that while I was scrolling through job postings, my husband Tom was quietly drafting a different kind of future, one in which his mother moved into our home. I became the household cook and caretaker, and he stood back and let it happen without saying a single word to me. The plan was already finished by the time I found out. The guest bedroom had been mentally assigned, the move-in date had been discussed, and the line Beverly had written in the email I found by accident on Tom's open laptop. Once she realizes what's happening, it'll already be done. Told me everything I needed to know about how much either of them had considered my feelings on the matter. The morning the story really begins, though I didn't know it at the time, was a Tuesday in late September. The light through our kitchen window had that amber, forgiving quality that makes everything look warmer than it is. I was at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm while I drafted a cover letter, and the house was quiet around me in the particular way that only feels comfortable when you know it belongs to you. The hardwood floors, the butcher block countertops I'd chosen myself, the small herb garden crowded onto the windowsill, thyme, basil, and a stubbornly surviving rosemary I'd been nursing since the year I moved in. Everything in that kitchen was something I had chosen, paid for, and loved. The house had been mine for 3 years before Tom and I even started dating, bought on my own salary from 7 years of work at Meridian Analytics, where I'd climbed from junior analyst to lead strategist and managed a team of 11 people before the word restructuring changed everything. I had been laid off 6 weeks earlier. My manager had used the exact tone of corporate sympathy that communicates, "This is not personal, but also, we will not make it easy for you." The severance package was fair on paper. The shock was not. I had given that company more than half a decade of 12-hour days, late nights, quarterly reviews, where I was consistently ranked in the top tier of my department. And I had genuinely believed, the way only people who have never been laid off believe, that performance was a kind of armor. It wasn't. I got the package, a generic LinkedIn recommendation, and the sudden vertigo-inducing expanse of unstructured time. Tom had been wonderful about it at first. He'd held me while I cried the night it happened, ordered Thai food from the place on Morrison Street, and told me, correctly if I'm honest, that I'd been miserable at Meridian for at least 2 years. He was a software consultant, steady income, good clients, enough that we didn't need my salary to meet our expenses. He'd said, "Take your time. Find something that actually excites you. You deserve better than that place anyway." And in those first weeks, I had believed him. I'd believed in the version of Tom who rubbed my shoulders and said the right things, who knew that my independence mattered to me, who understood, or so I thought, that the house and the life we shared in it were built on a partnership of equals. Beverly, Tom's mother, was always going to be the complication. I'd known that since the first dinner I'd had with her 4 years ago, when she'd asked me 3 separate questions about my parents' finances and called my apartment cozy in the way that means small. She was 63, recently widowed. Tom's father had died 18 months earlier, and she lived in a condo 40 minutes away that she described as adequate, with a heavy, pointed sigh whenever the subject arose. She was not overtly cruel. She remembered birthdays and brought food to people who were sick and kept a photograph of Tom on her kitchen counter that she'd update every few years as he aged. What she was, I would come to understand, was tactical. The warmth was real, but it was also calculated. She knew exactly when to deploy it and exactly when to withdraw it, and she had been perfecting that calibration for decades. The comments about my unemployment started the way all slow erosions start, gently enough to dismiss. The first one came when she stopped by, unannounced as always, 2 weeks after my layoff, carrying a foil-covered pan of lasagna and wearing an expression I would later identify as the face of someone executing the opening move of a long game. "Oh, still in your robe?" she said, not unkindly, when I answered the door. It was 11 on a Saturday morning. I'd been on a video call with a former colleague since 9, but I hadn't dressed yet, and Beverly saw that and filed it away and moved into the kitchen to deposit the lasagna with the ease of someone entering their own house. I thanked her and told her I was actually in the middle of something. She smiled and said, Of course. She just wanted to drop this off. The second comment came at Sunday dinner 3 weeks later, when Beverly mentioned, with the particular casualness of someone who has rehearsed the casualness, that her neighbor's daughter had found a new job within the week, really, just by putting herself out there. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at her soup. I looked at Tom. Tom looked at his soup. The third came through Tom himself, relayed so smoothly I almost missed the handoff. My mom thinks it might be good for you to have more structure right now. Maybe volunteer somewhere, just to keep busy. I'd stared at him across the dinner table for a moment too long before I answered, and in that moment I saw something. A small, almost imperceptible shift in his eyes, a brief failure of his usual steady gaze. I said, lightly, that I had plenty of structure, that I was actively interviewing, that I didn't need to volunteer somewhere to feel useful. He'd nodded and looked at his plate. I felt the small, cold weight of something I didn't yet have a name for settle in my chest. I told myself it was anxiety about the job search. I told myself Beverly was just a widow finding her way through grief, reaching toward her son with the only tool she had, which was neediness dressed as concern. I told myself Tom's strange moments of distraction were about work or about his father's death, which had affected him more than he'd fully processed. I told myself I was reading shadows into everything because I was stressed and untethered, and I worked very hard to believe it. Then I found the list. It was a Wednesday evening, and I was looking for a pen near the stack of books on the end table in the living room when an old envelope slid out from under Tom's laptop and landed face down on the cushion beside me. I turned it over without thinking. The handwriting was Beverly's. I knew it from years of birthday cards, the backward slant of her capital letters, the particular way she formed her sevens. The list read, guest bedroom dimensions, bathroom on second floor, storage in basement, parking for 2 cars, walking distance to pharmacy, bus route. I sat very still with the envelope in my hand and read it twice. Then I set it back where it had come from, precisely, carefully, and went to the kitchen and stood with my hands on the edge of the sink and the water running, not quite cold enough to be shocking. And I tried to make the list mean something innocent. She was looking for a new condo. She'd asked Tom to think about neighborhoods near us, check some logistics for her apartment search. That was all. That was plausible. I turned off the water and went back to the living room and read the list again. Guest bedroom dimensions. Our guest bedroom. Bathroom on the second floor. Our second floor. I put the envelope back and went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time. When Tom came home, I showed it to him. I kept my voice careful and neutral, the voice I'd learned to use in professional negotiations when I needed to gather information without tipping my hand. "What's this?" I asked, holding the envelope by its corner. He looked at it, and then he looked at me, and I saw the flash of something across his face. Not guilt exactly, but the close relative of guilt, the expression of someone caught near the edge of something he hasn't yet done, but has been steadily moving toward. "Oh," he said, "she's thinking about looking for a place closer to us. I think she was just asking about the neighborhood." He took the envelope from my hand and set it down with a finality that was designed to close the subject. "It's nothing," he said, and went to pour himself a drink. His shoulders were set wrong. He didn't look back at me. Over the next 2 weeks, I began to see the architecture of something I'd been refusing to look at directly. Tom was on his phone more, in the garage before coming inside, in the bathroom with the door closed, in the car in the driveway for 10 minutes after he pulled in, as if he needed to finish a conversation before re-entering the life we shared. His answers about his day became smoother, more detailed, in the particular way that answers sometimes become when they have been slightly rehearsed. Beverly called more often, and twice I watched Tom glance at his phone, see her name on the screen, and leave the room quickly with a muttered, "I've got it," that carried within it a small, compressed urgency. I kept a mental log of the moments that didn't quite fit. I told myself I was catastrophizing. I kept the log anyway. The discovery came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, and it came the way real discoveries often do, not through deliberate searching, but through a mundane accident that the universe permits when the truth has been circling long enough. I was at the kitchen table with a half-finished cover letter open on my screen when Tom's laptop, open beside mine, lit up with an incoming email notification. He'd stepped into the garage to take a phone call, and his browser was still open from earlier, when we'd been sharing an insurance document, and he hadn't closed the tab. I wasn't looking for anything. The notification sat at the edge of my peripheral vision for just long enough that I glanced at it without deciding to. I saw the sender's name, Beverly, and the subject line, final details, move-in logistics, and the first line of the preview text before the screen dimmed. "Tom, I think if we time it right, by the time she realizes what's happening, it'll already be done. Once I'm in the house..." My hands went cold. Not trembling cold. The other kind. The kind that happens when your body understands something a full second before your mind does, when your nervous system absorbs a shock and goes completely, eerily still. The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the rain against the back window and the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint murmur of Tom's voice from the garage. Ordinary sounds, sounds I'd heard 1,000 times, and they were suddenly strange and very far away, as if heard from underwater. I looked at the garage door. I looked at the laptop screen. Then, with a deliberateness that surprised me, I had expected to feel frantic, but what I felt instead was the cold, crystalline clarity of someone who has just understood the rules of a game they didn't know they were playing. I reached across and clicked the email open and read it in full. The email was long. Beverly had written it the way she did everything, methodically, with the precision of someone who has thought something through many times before committing it to paper. She outlined the timeline. She would tell Tom she'd decided to move closer to family, framing it as a spontaneous emotional decision rather than the months-long scheme it clearly was. She would arrive with her things over a weekend when I'd be visiting my sister in Portland, a trip I'd mentioned in passing at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago, stored and deployed like a chess piece. She wrote about the guest bedroom as if it were already hers, referring to my room and my bathroom and the space I'll use for my things. She wrote that Tom had already agreed to clear out the shelves in the hallway closet, And then came the line that I read 3 times before it fully landed, the sentence that rearranged every memory of the past 2 months into something I didn't recognize. And remember what we said about keeping her busy. If she feels useful in the house, cooking and helping with things, she won't have time to make trouble. You know how she gets when she feels like she's losing control. This way, everyone wins. Everyone wins. I set Tom's laptop down on the table very carefully because my hands were shaking now. The cold stillness had broken, and what replaced it was a trembling that started in my fingers and moved up through my arms and into my chest. I stood up. I sat down. I stood up again. The kitchen that I had loved, the herb garden on the windowsill, the butcher block countertop where I'd made hundreds of meals, all of it looked different now, filmed over with something I couldn't name. I was going to be kept busy. I was going to cook and feel useful in my own house. That was the plan. That was what they had decided for me. Tom came in from the garage 17 minutes later. I know because I sat at the kitchen table and watched the clock on the microwave, not moving, not picking up my phone, not doing anything except sitting with the particular stillness of someone who has crossed a threshold and cannot cross back. My coffee was cold. The rain was still tapping against the window. When the garage door opened and Tom stepped in, shaking water from his jacket, he looked up and saw my face, and he stopped. There must have been something in my expression that he recognized because for a moment, just one, before he composed himself, something that looked very much like fear moved through his eyes. "Hey," he said, carefully. "How was your afternoon?" "I read Beverly's email," I said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. "Sarah?" "The one about move-in logistics," I said. "The one where she talks about keeping me busy cooking so I won't have time to make trouble." I kept my voice completely level. I had decided somewhere in those 17 minutes at the table that I would not cry. Not yet. Not in front of him. The one where she references what you said, what you both said, about how to handle me. He set his jacket on the back of a chair and rubbed his face with both hands in the way he did when he was trying to buy himself time. It's not. She exaggerates things. She writes dramatically. That's not how I framed it. How did you frame it, Tom? He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, and the fact that he didn't try to stand over me or move toward me, the fact that he sat across the table with distance between us, told me more than anything he'd said so far. "She's been struggling since my dad died," he said. "She's lonely. She mentioned wanting to be closer to family, and I said..." He stopped, started again. "I said it might make sense for her to stay with us for a while, just until she got her footing." "And the part about clearing out the hallway closet for her things?" I asked. "Did you do that yet?" He looked at the table. "Tom, I moved a few boxes to the basement," he said very quietly. "Last weekend when you were at your sister's." I had been at my sister's last weekend. I had called him from her porch Sunday evening and told him I missed him, and he'd said he missed me too, and he had been in our house moving boxes to make room for his mother. I felt the kitchen tilt slightly, the way a room does when you've been sitting very still for a long time and then suddenly understand the full weight of what you're holding. "When was this decided?" I asked. "Give me a date. When did you and your mother decide she was moving into this house?" He looked up. "About 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks ago. The week I was laid off, the week I was crying into his shoulder and he was holding me and telling me everything was going to be fine. "Take your time. We don't need your salary." He had been planning this for the entire duration of my unemployment. He had watched me feel vulnerable and destabilized, and quietly, methodically, built a structure around my vulnerability that would make me dependent, domestic, contained. "I want you to hear yourself," I said. "I want you to hear what you just told me. The week I lost my job, you and your mother sat down and decided she would move in here, into my house. And you let me feel like you were supporting me while you were arranging my life behind my back." My voice had not risen. I was proud of that in a distant way. "Did it ever occur to you to ask me?" "I knew you'd say no," he said. The honesty of it was almost worse than a lie would have been. The following morning, Beverly arrived at 9:45 with 2 suitcases and a box of kitchen things. I knew she was coming because at 11 the previous night, after Tom and I had talked, or rather, after I had talked, and Tom had offered a series of increasingly hollow explanations that circled back every time to his mother's grief and his own inability to hurt her. I'd told him, "Call her and tell her this conversation happened. Tell her I know." He'd gone silent in a way that meant he hadn't. And when I came downstairs at 9, she was already pulling into the driveway. She was wearing a pale blue cardigan and carrying the box of kitchen things with both hands. And when I opened the door before she could knock, she looked at me and adjusted her expression with the speed of long practice into something that was meant to read as warmth. "Sarah, dear," she said, "I'm so glad we're doing this. It's going to be wonderful for all of us." "Tom didn't call you," I said. A small pause. The warmth recalibrated. "He mentioned you'd had a conversation," she said. "But I've already given notice on my condo, so—" "You gave notice before Tom told me anything," I said. "Before either of you said a single word to me." She set the box down on the porch and tilted her head in the way of someone preparing to be patient with a difficult child. "I understand you're upset," she said. "Change can be difficult. But you have to understand I'm not getting any younger, and Tom and I both felt that—" "Tom and I said. "Tom and I felt. Tom and I decided." I looked at her steadily. "This is my house, Beverly. My name is the only name on the deed. Tom and you don't get to decide what happens inside it." Her expression shifted then, not to anger, not immediately, but to something cooler and more precise, the expression of someone setting aside a tool that isn't working and reaching for a different one. "I know this feels sudden," she said, "but I think once you settle into it, you'll see that having an extra pair of hands around the house is actually a gift. You've had a stressful few months and you don't need to be doing everything alone. I can cook. I can help. You wrote to Tom that you'd keep me busy cooking so I wouldn't have time to make trouble," I said. I read the email. The silence that followed was different from the one with Tom. That one had been guilty. This one was strategic. Beverly looked at me for a long moment with those cataloging eyes, reassessing. Then she bent, picked up the box from the porch, and said pleasantly, "I think we should all sit down together and talk about this calmly." "I think you should put your things back in your car," I said. She walked past me into the house. I stood in the doorway for a moment with the morning air cold and damp on my face, and I made a decision. Not the hot, shaking kind that people make in the middle of a fight, but the other kind. The kind that arrives quietly and completely, like a door closing on something that deserved to be closed. I went upstairs. I called my friend Dana, who had been a paralegal for 11 years. I told her everything in about 7 minutes. She said, "Okay, first, your house, your deed. She has zero legal right to be there without your consent. Second, get a family law attorney on the phone today. Third, document everything. That email, any texts, every conversation from this point forward, do it now. She paused. Also, Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is awful. I said I know, and I meant it, and I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed and let myself feel the full weight of it for exactly 2 minutes. The betrayal of it. The smallness of what they'd planned for me. Cook and feel useful. As if my whole self could be managed down to that. Contained in an apron in my own kitchen while they rearranged my life around me like furniture. 2 minutes. Then I opened my contacts and called my attorney. Paul Mercer had represented me in the house purchase 3 years ago. He answered on the second ring. When I finished explaining, he said, "The legal situation is clean. It's your house, sole ownership, no community property laws apply. She has no right of residence without your written consent. The bad news is that if she refuses to leave voluntarily and claims any sort of tenancy, removal requires a formal notice to quit process. Has she paid you any money? Signed anything?" No and no. "Then she's a guest without a standing invitation. Keep that email. Don't delete anything. I'll draft a cease and desist." I thanked him and went downstairs. Tom and Beverly were at the kitchen table. Beverly had made tea. In my kitchen, with my mugs, sitting in my chair by the window, with her hands wrapped around a mug and an expression of careful, preemptive serenity. Tom sat across from her. He looked up when I came in, and his face did something complicated I didn't have the patience to decode. "We should talk," he said. "I agree," I said. I pulled out a chair and sat down and put my hands flat on the table. "I've just spoken to my attorney. Beverly, you're welcome to finish your tea, and then I'd like you to take your things and leave. If you choose not to, you'll receive a formal notice to quit within 24 hours. Beverly set down her mug. The serenity had stiffened. "Sarah," she said, in the tone of someone addressing someone unreasonable, "I think you're letting your emotions run away with you. I know you're going through a hard time." "My attorney's name is Paul Mercer," I said. "He handled the Evans property dispute on Caldwell Road 2 years ago. He's very good." Tom stood up. "Can everyone just... Please, I'm asking both of you to take a breath." He looked at me with something I recognized as desperation. "She's my mother. She's alone. She lost my dad. Can we please just talk about this like adults instead of involving lawyers?" I said. "Tom, your mother had a plan written out, a timeline. She knew about my Portland trip and used it. She'd already decided how to manage me. And you knew." My voice did not rise. "You knew, and you helped." He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He looked at Beverly. Beverly looked at the table. The silence was complete. "That's what I thought," I said. Then Beverly reached into her cardigan pocket and placed a folded document on the table. She smoothed it flat with both palms in a gesture that was almost ceremonial. "I wasn't going to bring this up today," she said, "but I think under the circumstances you should be aware." I looked at the document. It was a loan agreement. The down payment on my house, $47,000, listed as a personal loan from Richard and Beverly Harland to Tom Harland with a repayment clause. Tom's name, not mine. I had put down $47,000 from my own savings, every dollar of it, and I had the bank statements to prove it. But Beverly had a document that said otherwise, dated 3 years ago, with Tom's signature at the bottom. I picked it up. I read it twice. I set it down. I looked at Tom, and he was staring at the table with the fixed concentration of someone trying to become invisible. "Did you sign this?" I asked. The pause lasted long enough to be its own answer. "She asked me to," he said. "At the time. She said it was just a formality in case anything happened. She wanted to feel like she had some security. "You signed a document claiming your parents loaned us the down payment for this house," I said, "when you and I both know I paid that down payment myself from my savings account." I kept my voice at the same quiet register. It cost me something. Underneath it, something was burning white and steady. "That's fraud, Tom." Beverly folded her hands. "I'd call it insurance," she said pleasantly. I stood up. I went to the small desk in the corner of the kitchen where I kept household files and found the folder labeled Mortgage, Purchase 2022, and I found the bank statement from September of that year showing the wire transfer of $47,000 from my personal savings to the escrow company. I put it on the table next to her document. Then I photographed both with my phone. "I'm sending this to Paul right now," I said, "along with your email, and I'm going to ask him about the legal definition of fraudulent misrepresentation." I picked up my phone. "Beverly, I want you out of this house in the next 2 hours. Tom, you and I will have a separate conversation about whether this marriage is something we're going to repair or something we're going to dissolve. But that conversation is not happening today, and it is not happening in front of your mother." Beverly stood. The serenity was gone entirely now. What was underneath it was older and less practiced. "You think you can just throw me out?" she said. "After everything this family has given you? After the years—" 2 hours, I said. "I'll be upstairs." I walked out of the kitchen. My legs were steady. My hands had stopped shaking. Somewhere between the fraudulent loan document and Beverly's last sentence, everything grief-soft had gone hard and cold and clear. Beverly left in 1 hour and 40 minutes. I heard her car back out of the driveway, and I sat on the edge of my bed and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for weeks. Then I called Dana and told her what had happened. She was quiet a moment and then said, "The loan document is actually a gift to you. A fraudulent paper trail is now your leverage." She was right. Paul Mercer sent a certified letter to Beverly within 48 hours, formally notifying her that any claim to residence or financial interest in the property was legally unsupported, and that the fraudulent loan document had been referred to the relevant authorities. Beverly's attorney, she retained one the following week, reviewed my bank records and apparently advised her to abandon the matter. She did not apologize. I had not expected her to. Tom and I spent 3 weeks in the house after that, polite and careful and wrecked, before we both acknowledged what we already knew. He went to stay with a friend in early November. We began mediation in December. I have no anger toward him now, only the particular sadness of having loved someone who was too afraid of his own mother to be a real partner. His silence, in the end, had been the entire story. The divorce was finalized in February. I kept the house. It is April now, and the mornings are bright again. The light through the kitchen window is the same amber it always was, but it lands on different things. A coffee mug that is only mine, a notepad with the address of my new office, a job offer letter I've read so many times the paper has gone soft at the folds. I start in 3 weeks, a director-level role at a firm I respect, with a salary better than anything Meridian ever offered. I sit in my chair by the window, my chair in my kitchen, in my house. And the quiet is not the quiet of someone waiting for the next thing to go wrong. It is the quiet of someone who has settled into herself and found the ground solid. The rosemary on the windowsill survived another winter. Against all reasonable expectation, so stubbornly, so entirely did I.